The axe blade caught the late afternoon sun as it fell, and Sarah knew she should stop, but winter in Montana territory waited for no woman, not even one carrying a child due in 4 weeks. Her husband had been dead 3 months now, buried under a cottonwood tree after his horse threw him into a rocky ravine, and the cabin still needed firewood if she and this baby were going to survive the brutal season ahead. September 1883 had arrived with a crispness that promised an early winter, and Sarah Campbell was running out of time. The woodpile beside the cabin stood pathetically small, maybe enough for 2 weeks if she burned sparingly, and she had learned during her first Montana winter that sparing the fire meant risking frostbite or worse. Her back ached something fierce as she positioned another log on the chopping block, the weight of her belly throwing off her balance in ways that would have been comical if the situation were not so desperate. She raised the axe again, feeling the pull in her shoulders, the strain in her lower back. The baby kicked hard against her ribs as if in protest, and she paused to catch her breath, one hand pressed against her side. The valley spread out before her in shades of gold and amber, the aspens already turning, the mountains in the distance capped with snow that would descend into the lowlands soon enough. Their homestead sat 5 miles from the nearest neighbor, 15 miles from the town of Crow's Nest, and Sarah had never felt more alone than she did in this moment, surrounded by beauty and facing a winter that could kill her and her unborn child without a second thought. "Fool woman," she muttered to herself, but she lifted the axe anyway. James would have had this done by now, would have split and stacked enough wood to last until spring. James had been good at many things, a capable rancher and a kind husband, even if their marriage had been more practical than passionate. She had been 19 when they wed 2 years ago, him 28, both of them looking for partnership more than romance. He had needed a wife to help work the land, and she had needed escape from her father's house in Ohio, where prospects were slim and her stepmother's cruelty was abundant. Their arrangement had worked well enough. She had not expected to love him desperately, and she had not, but she had respected him and even grown fond of him, and his death had left a hole in her life that went beyond mere loneliness. The axe came down and the log split clean. Small victories. She bent to pick up the pieces, feeling the tightness across her belly, the baby sitting so low now she wondered how she remained upright. As she reached for another log, a wave of dizziness washed over her and she stumbled, catching herself against the chopping block. The world tilted sideways for a moment, black spots dancing at the edges of her vision, and she knew she had pushed too hard. Again, "You need to stop." The voice came from behind her, male and unfamiliar, and Sarah spun around so fast she nearly fell. Her hand went instinctively to the knife at her belt, the only weapon she had kept close since James died. A man sat astride a paint horse at the edge of her property, maybe 30 feet away, and she cursed herself for being so absorbed in her task that she had not heard him approach. That kind of carelessness could get a woman killed out here. He raised both hands slowly, palms out, and made no move to dismount. "Did not mean to startle you, ma'am. I am just passing through." Sarah kept her hand on the knife, studying him. He was young, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair that needed cutting and several days' worth of stubble on his jaw. His clothes were dusty from travel, his hat battered, but his eyes were kind and his posture unthreatening. More importantly, he looked tired, the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that came from riding long and hard, not the look of a man hunting for trouble. "This is private property," she said, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "The town is 15 miles east." "Yes, ma'am, I know." He lowered his hands slowly, resting them on his saddle horn. "I am headed that way, but I saw you struggling with that axe and thought I might offer some help before I move on. I am managing fine." "With respect, ma'am, you do not look like you are managing fine. You look like you are about to fall over." His gaze dropped briefly to her swollen belly, then back to her face. "When are you due?" "That is none of your concern, stranger. You are right, it is not." He shifted in his saddle, and she noticed the way he favored his left side, as if something pained him. "But I have been riding for 3 days straight, and my conscience will not let me pass by a woman in your condition trying to split firewood alone. Let me help you finish that woodpile and I will be on my way. No payment needed, no strings attached." Sarah wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed at her not to trust a strange man, especially out here where she had no help and no recourse if things went badly. But she looked at the meager pile of split wood, then at the mountain of logs James had cut last spring before he died, logs that still needed splitting, and she knew she could not do it alone. Not before the baby came, and certainly not after. "What is your name?" she asked. "Cole Matheson, ma'am." "Originally from Texas, most recently from nowhere in particular." He offered a tired smile. "I am a drifter and I will not pretend otherwise, but I am an honest one. I have worked ranches from here to the Mexican border and I know my way around an axe. You are running from something." It was not a question, and he did not treat it like one. "Yes, ma'am, but not the law and not anything that will bring trouble to your door, just some bad memories and worse decisions. I am trying to outride my past, though I am learning that does not work as well as I hoped." His honesty surprised her. Most men would have lied, would have painted themselves as heroes or victims. She appreciated the straightforwardness even as it made her wary. A man running from his past might be dangerous, or he might just be human. James had taught her that the world was not as simple as her father's sermons had suggested. "I am Sarah Campbell," she said finally. "My husband died 3 months back. The baby is due in 4 weeks, maybe less. And yes, I need help with the wood, but I cannot pay you." "I already said I do not want payment." Cole swung down from his horse with a slight wince, confirming her suspicion that he was hurt. Nothing serious, probably just the aches that came from long days in the saddle. "You have water I could offer my horse, and maybe you could spare some food." "I have been eating jerky and hardtack for too long." Sarah considered this. Food she could manage. She had a garden that had produced well, and she had put up vegetables for winter. There was salt pork in the cellar and dried beans, flour for biscuits. "I can feed you supper." "But you sleep in the barn, not the house." "Would not dream of asking otherwise, ma'am." He led his horse toward the water trough near the barn, moving with the easy confidence of a man comfortable around animals. The paint drank deeply while Cole waited, and Sarah watched him, trying to reconcile her fear with her need. She had been alone so long, managing everything herself, and the thought of someone helping felt both like relief and like failure. When the horse had drunk its fill, Cole tied it in the shade of the barn and walked back to where Sarah stood by the chopping block. Up close, she could see he was handsome in a rough way, with sun-weathered skin and green eyes that held shadows of things she could only guess at. He was maybe 6 feet tall, broad in the shoulders, and his hands looked strong and capable. Everything about him suggested competence, and she found herself relaxing slightly despite her better judgment. "Let me take that," he said, gesturing to the axe. She hesitated only a moment before handing it over. He tested the weight, checked the blade, then nodded. "Good axe. Needs sharpening, but it will do." He positioned a log on the block and split it with one clean stroke, the wood falling away in perfect halves. Then another and another, falling into an easy rhythm that made the work look effortless. Sarah watched for a few minutes, then retreated to the porch steps to sit, her body grateful for the rest. The baby was quiet now, settled low in her pelvis, and she pressed her hand against the firm swell, feeling the shape of a tiny foot or elbow beneath her skin. Cole worked steadily, not rushing but not dawdling either, and the pile of split wood grew steadily. He did not try to make conversation, did not ask intrusive questions, just did the job he had volunteered for. Sarah found herself studying him in the golden light, noticing the grace in his movements, the efficiency. This was a man who knew hard work, who did not shy from it. After about an hour, he paused to remove his jacket, draping it over the fence, and she saw the way his shirt stuck to his back with sweat. He picked up a log, set it on the block, and kept going. The sun was lowering toward the mountains when he finally stopped, surveying the woodpile with satisfaction. It was 3 times the size it had been when he started, a respectable amount that would last several weeks at least. Not enough for the whole winter, but better. Much better. "That is a good start," he said, walking over to the porch. His face was flushed with exertion, his hair damp with sweat. "You have more logs that need splitting?" "Yes, but you have done enough for today." Sarah stood carefully, using the porch rail for support. "Come inside, I will make supper." She led him into the cabin, which was small but well built, consisting of a main room with a fireplace and cook stove, a bedroom partitioned off by a curtain, and a loft where James had planned to put children eventually. The furniture was simple, most of it made by James's hands, but everything was clean and orderly. Sarah kept house well, one of the few skills her stepmother had taught her that proved useful. Cole washed up at the basin while Sarah started supper, moving around the kitchen with practiced efficiency despite her bulk. She put on a pot of beans that had been soaking all day, fried up some salt pork, and made biscuits in the Dutch oven. It was plain food but substantial, and she saw Cole's eyes light up when she set it on the table. "This smells like heaven, ma'am. Call me Sarah. I am tired of ma'am." "Sarah, then." He waited until she sat before he started eating, another mark of manners that surprised her. Most drifters she had encountered, few as they were, tended toward roughness. Cole had clearly been raised with some gentility. Even if life had worn it down, they ate in silence for a while, both hungry, both focused on the food. Finally, Sarah poured coffee and sat back, studying him across the table. "Where are you headed, Cole Matheson?" Crow's Nest to start. "I heard they might be hiring ranch hands for winter work. After that, I am not sure. Maybe I will stay in Montana, maybe I will keep drifting." He wrapped his hands around the coffee cup, staring into it. "I have been moving for 2 years now, ever since I left Texas. Gets tiresome after a while." "What happened in Texas?" He glanced up, and she saw pain flicker across his face. "I was engaged to be married. Pretty girl named Elizabeth, daughter of the rancher I worked for. I thought we loved each other. Turns out she loved someone else, a man with more money and better prospects. Called off the wedding 3 days before the ceremony. Her father fired me the same day, said he could not have me around as a reminder of his daughter's poor judgment." He laughed bitterly. "Like I was the one who broke faith. I am sorry. It was 2 years ago. I should be over it by now." But the way he said it suggested he was not really. "What about you? How did you end up out here, married to a rancher in Montana Territory?" Sarah wrapped her own hands around her cup, feeling the warmth seep into her palms. "I needed to leave Ohio. My mother died when I was 12. My father remarried a woman who made it clear I was unwelcome and there were no prospects for me there. James posted an advertisement seeking a wife. We corresponded for 3 months, then I took the train west. We married the day I arrived. Did you love him?" It was an impertinent question, but she found she did not mind answering. "No, but I respected him and he treated me well. That is more than many women get." She looked around the cabin at the life James had built. He was a good man. "He did not deserve to die at 30 years old, leaving me alone and pregnant. Life is not fair about what people deserve. No, it is not." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell outside, the cabin growing dim until Sarah lit a lamp. The warm glow filled the space, pushing back the shadows, and for the first time in months, Sarah did not feel quite so alone. It was dangerous, she knew, to take comfort in a stranger's presence, but she allowed herself this small grace anyway. "You should get some rest," she said finally. "There is a cot in the barn and blankets. I will make breakfast at dawn." Cole stood, collecting his hat. "Thank you for the meal, Sarah. Best I have had in longer than I can remember." He paused at the door, looking back at her. "I will split more wood tomorrow before I go, if that is acceptable." "You do not have to do that, I know, but I want to." He held her gaze for a moment longer, something passing between them that she could not name, then he stepped out into the night. Sarah cleaned up the supper dishes slowly, her mind turning over the strangeness of the day. This morning she had been alone, struggling with an impossible task. Tonight, a stranger was sleeping in her barn, and her woodpile was 3 times larger. She did not know what to make of Cole Matheson, this drifter with sad eyes and capable hands, but she found she was glad he had stopped. Not just for the help, though that was considerable, but for the company. For the reminder that she was not the only person in the world carrying grief and trying to move forward anyway. She extinguished the lamp and lay down in the bed she had shared with James, one hand resting on her belly. The baby was active tonight, rolling and kicking, and she wondered what kind of world this child would be born into. Hard and lonely, probably, at least at first. But she would do her best to make it good anyway, to build a life worth living even if it was not the life she had imagined. That was all anyone could do. Morning came cold and clear, frost painting the windows in delicate patterns. Sarah dressed warmly and started the fire in the cook stove, putting on coffee and mixing up flapjack batter. She was pouring the first cakes onto the griddle when she heard the sound of an axe biting into wood. Cole was already working. She made a large breakfast, knowing he would need the fuel, and carried it out to the yard on a tray. He had been at it for maybe an hour already, and the woodpile had grown noticeably. He stopped when he saw her, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the morning chill. "You did not have to bring that out here," he said, but his eyes were on the food. "Sit, eat while it is hot." She had brought 2 plates, 2 cups of coffee, and she sat beside him on the porch steps. The sun was just cresting the mountains, painting everything gold and pink, and the valley looked like something from a dream. "You were up early," she observed. "Could not sleep much." "Too used to moving, I guess." He bit into a flapjack, closing his eyes briefly in appreciation. "These are good. My mother's recipe, one of the few things I remember clearly about her." They ate as the sun climbed higher, burning off the frost, warming the air. Sarah felt the baby shift inside her, a rolling movement that was both uncomfortable and reassuring. Soon she would meet this child, this person she had carried for 8 months without ever seeing. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "Sarah, can I ask you something?" Cole set down his empty plate, turning to look at her. "What are you going to do when the baby comes? You cannot manage this place alone with an infant." "I will manage because I have no choice." She heard the defensiveness in her voice and tried to soften it. "I have been thinking about it. I can sell some of the cattle in spring, use the money to hire help. Or maybe I will take in sewing work from town, though that would mean traveling back and forth, which is not ideal. Those are not great options. They are the only options I have." She stood, collecting the dishes. "I appreciate your concern, but I have been taking care of myself for a long time. I will figure it out." Cole stood too, and for a moment she thought he might argue, but instead he just nodded. "I am sure you will. You seem like the stubborn type." "I am going to take that as a compliment." It was meant as one. He returned to splitting wood while Sarah went back inside to clean up and start on her daily chores. She had chickens to feed, eggs to collect, a cow to milk. The garden needed harvesting, the vegetables put up before the hard freezes came. There was sewing to be done, mending James's old shirts into baby clothes, making diapers from flour sacks. Her life was full of small, endless tasks that kept her busy from dawn until dark, and she had learned not to think too far ahead because the future was too overwhelming to contemplate. By midday, Cole had split an astonishing amount of wood. The pile now looked respectable, maybe enough for 6 or 8 weeks. He was still going, seemingly tireless despite the fact that he must be exhausted from yesterday's work on top of today's. Sarah made him stop for a lunch of bread and cheese and cold well water, forcing him to sit in the shade and rest. "You are going to kill yourself working in this heat," she said, though the day was mild by summer standards. "I have worked in worse. Texas summers make this feel like spring." But he drank the water gratefully, eating the simple lunch as if it were a feast. "I want to get as much done as I can before I leave." "When are you planning to leave?" "Tomorrow morning, I suppose. I need to get to Crow's Nest and see about that work." He glanced at her, something uncertain in his expression. "Unless you need me to stay longer." Sarah wanted to say yes, wanted to ask him to stay and split all the wood, to fix the fence that was sagging on the north side, to help her with the 1,000 other things that needed doing before winter. But she had no money to pay him, and charity could only stretch so far. He had his own life to live, his own problems to solve. "You have done more than enough," she said. "I am grateful, truly." He looked like he wanted to say something else, but instead he just nodded and went back to work. Sarah returned to the cabin, feeling that strange mix of relief and disappointment that came from saying the right thing even when you wanted to say something different. That evening, she made a better supper than the night before, roasting a chicken she had been saving and making gravy to go with mashed potatoes and the last of her green beans. It was a thank you meal, a goodbye meal, and she put extra care into it. Cole came in dusty and exhausted, but he smiled when he saw the food. "You did not have to go to this trouble. You split enough wood to last me 2 months. The least I can do is feed you properly." They ate, and the conversation came easier tonight, ranging from books they had read to places they had seen to dreams they had harbored before life complicated things. Cole was well-spoken when he relaxed, educated beyond what she would have expected for a drifter. He had attended 2 years of university before his father died and the money ran out, had read widely, had thoughts on politics and philosophy that showed a sharp mind. Sarah found herself enjoying the talk more than she had enjoyed anything in months, the simple pleasure of intellectual companionship. "You should have been a teacher," she said at one point, "or a lawyer, maybe in another life." He pushed his plate back, replete. "But I am good with horses and cattle, and that is worth something too." After supper, they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge, the sky so vast and clear it felt like you could fall upward into it. The night was cool but not cold yet, and Sarah wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, content to sit in silence. Cole sat beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth but not so close as to be improper, and she tried not to think about how much she would miss this when he left in the morning. "Sarah, I have been thinking." Cole's voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "About your situation." "Please do not. I told you I will manage. I know you will, but you should not have to." He turned to face her, his expression serious in the starlight. "What if I stayed, just through the winter, to help you get through the hardest part? I could split the rest of the wood, help you prepare for the baby, make sure you and the child are safe and provided for. Come spring, when things ease up, I could move on to Crow's Nest or wherever." Sarah stared at him, trying to process the offer. "I cannot pay you. I do not need money. You are already feeding me and I can sleep in the barn. That is payment enough. People will talk. A widow and a strange man living on the same property. Let them talk. You will be in the house, I will be in the barn, and anyone with eyes can see you are about to have a baby. There is nothing scandalous about me helping a woman in need." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I know I am a stranger and you have no reason to trust me, but I swear to you, Sarah, I mean you no harm. I just cannot ride away knowing you are out here alone, trying to do the impossible." She wanted to say no. Pride demanded it, and caution, and all the lessons she had learned about not depending on anyone. But she looked at the woodpile he had built, thought about the baby coming soon, about the long Montana winter ahead, and she knew she needed help. More than that, and this surprised her, she wanted him to stay. Not just for the labor, though that was significant, but for the companionship, for the feeling of not being utterly alone in the world. "Why would you do this?" she asked. "You do not know me. Maybe that is exactly why. You do not know about Elizabeth or all the ways I failed back in Texas. You do not look at me and see my mistakes. You just see someone who can help, and I can." He paused, searching for words. "I have been running for 2 years, Sarah, and it has not made me feel any better. Maybe it is time to stop running and start being useful instead." She considered this, turning it over in her mind. It was not a perfect solution, and it would certainly raise eyebrows in town, but she could not afford to care about gossip. Survival mattered more than reputation. "All right," she said finally. You can stay through the winter, but we need rules. You sleep in the barn always. You do not come into the house unless I invite you, and if at any point I feel uncomfortable, you leave immediately." "Agreed, agreed." He held out his hand and she shook it, his grip firm and warm. "Thank you, Sarah. You are giving me something I need too, even if you do not realize it." "What is that?" "Purpose. A reason to stay in one place and do something that matters." They sat for a while longer, not talking, just existing in the same space. Sarah felt the baby kick a hard jab against her ribs and she winced. Cole noticed. "You all right?" "Just the baby reminding me it is in there." She pressed her hand to the spot and the baby kicked again, as if in response. "It is active tonight. Can I ask if you know what you are having, or is it one of those mysteries that only reveals itself at birth, a mystery? Though the women in town seem to think they know based on how I am carrying. Half of them say boy, half say girl, so one group will get to claim they were right. Do you have a preference? Healthy. That is my only preference." She meant it too. Boy or girl did not matter nearly as much as 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a strong set of lungs. Though I suppose a boy would have an easier time of things, inheriting this land and working it. A girl would face more challenges. A girl would also have you as a mother, teaching her to be strong and stubborn. That is worth something. Sarah smiled despite herself. "You barely know me. How can you be sure I am strong and stubborn?" "Because you are 8 months pregnant, widowed 3 months ago, and you were out here splitting wood by yourself. If that does not define strong and stubborn, I do not know what does." Fair point. She could not argue with that logic. That night, Sarah lay in bed listening to the sounds of coal settling into the barn, the small noises carrying across the yard in the still air. She felt safer knowing he was there, which was either foolish or sensible depending on how things turned out. Time would tell. For now, she would accept the help and be grateful for it, and she would worry about the rest later. The days fell into a rhythm after that. Cole rose early and worked hard, splitting the rest of the logs, then moving on to other tasks that needed doing. He repaired the sagging fence, patched holes in the barn roof, chopped wood for kindling, and did 100 other jobs that Sarah had been dreading. She cooked and cleaned and managed the household work, and in the evenings they ate together and talked, gradually learning each other's stories. She learned that Cole's mother had died when he was young, that his father had been a rancher who drank too much after his wife's death and eventually drank himself into the grave. She learned that Cole had a younger sister somewhere in Louisiana, married to a shopkeeper, and that they wrote letters occasionally though they were not close. She learned that he had been engaged for a year before Elizabeth broke his heart, that he had truly believed they would build a life together, and that the betrayal had shattered something fundamental in him. He learned that Sarah's father was a minister, stern and cold, more interested in hellfire sermons than in his daughter's well-being. He learned that her stepmother had been cruel in small, petty ways that left no bruises but plenty of scars. He learned that Sarah had married James knowing she did not love him because it was still better than staying in her father's house, and that she had come to care for James even if it was never the grand passion of novels. He learned that she was afraid of childbirth, terrified actually, because her mother had died bringing a stillborn son into the world and Sarah had always feared the same fate. "You will be fine," Cole said when she confessed this one evening. "You are strong and women have babies every day." "Women also die every day. My mother did. Your mother is not you." He reached across the table and covered her hand with his, a brief touch that sent unexpected warmth through her. "You are going to get through this, and I will be here to help however I can." It was a promise, and she chose to believe it. October arrived with cold rains that turned the world gray and brown. The aspens lost their leaves, the garden frosted over, and Sarah moved through her days with increasing difficulty as the baby grew impossibly larger. She was ungainly now, waddling more than walking, and her back ached constantly. She slept poorly, the baby pressing on her bladder, her hips sore from the weight. Cole took over more of the heavy chores without being asked, fetching water from the well, carrying in wood for the stove. Milking the cow when bending over became too difficult for Sarah. "I feel useless," she complained one morning, frustrated by her own limitations. "You are growing a human being, that is not useless." Cole set a bucket of fresh milk on the counter. "Give yourself some grace, Sarah. Your body is doing something miraculous." "It does not feel miraculous, it feels exhausting." "I imagine it is both." He was right, of course, but that did not make it easier. She forced herself to keep moving, to stay active, because the midwife in town had told her that women who stayed active had easier births. Whether that was true or just folklore, Sarah did not know, but she was willing to try anything that might help. One afternoon in mid-October, they were in the yard when Sarah felt a strange tightening across her belly, a sensation that was not painful but was definitely unusual. She stopped walking, one hand going to her stomach, and Cole noticed immediately. "What is wrong?" "I do not know. Something just felt strange." The tightening eased after a moment and she relaxed. "Maybe nothing. The baby has been moving a lot today. Should we go to town, get the midwife?" "No, not yet. I am probably just being nervous." But over the next few hours, the tightening sensation came and went several more times, and Sarah began to wonder if this was the beginning of labor. It was too early, still 3 weeks before her due date, but babies came on their own schedule. By evening, the tightening had become more regular and definitely more painful. Sarah was gripping the edge of the table during one contraction when Cole came in for supper, and the look on his face was pure alarm. "That is it. I am riding to town to get the midwife." "It is 15 miles, Cole, and it will be dark soon. You will break your neck." Sarah breathed through the pain, waiting for it to pass. "Besides, this could go on for hours yet. First babies take a long time." "I do not care if it takes days. I am not letting you do this alone." His vehemence surprised her, and she realized that he was genuinely frightened. For her, the thought warmed something in her chest, even through the discomfort of the contractions. "All right, go get Mabel Harper. She is the midwife. Lives in the White House on the south end of town, near the church. Tell her Sarah Campbell is in labor." Cole was on his horse in minutes, riding hard into the gathering darkness. Sarah watched him go, then retreated into the cabin to wait. The contractions continued, growing stronger and closer together, and she paced the floor trying to manage the pain. She had heard stories about childbirth, about women screaming and suffering, and she was determined not to be that woman. She would be strong. She would get through this. But as the hours passed and the contractions intensified, her resolve wavered. This hurt worse than anything she had ever experienced. A deep, wrenching pain that started in her back and wrapped around to her belly, squeezing like a vise. She tried different positions, walking, sitting, lying down, but nothing helped much. She was alone in the cabin, in the wilderness, about to give birth, and suddenly all her bravery seemed like foolishness. She did not know how much time had passed when she heard hoofbeats outside, then voices. The door opened and Cole burst in, followed by a stout woman in her 50s carrying a black bag. "Mabel Harper, thank God. All right, dear, let us see what we have here." Mabel took over with brisk efficiency, examining Sarah, asking questions, preparing supplies. "You are doing fine. First babies take their time, but you are progressing well. This little one should be here by morning." Morning felt like an eternity away. Sarah labored through the night, pacing and breathing and occasionally crying out when the contractions peaked. Mabel stayed with her, coaching her through each wave of pain, and Cole waited outside, pacing the porch like an expectant father. At one point, Sarah heard Mabel speak to him. "You are not the father?" "No, ma'am, just a friend helping out." "Well, you are a good friend." Not many men would ride that hard in the dark to fetch a midwife for someone else's wife. Sarah did not hear Cole's response, but she found herself wondering what he had said, what he thought of her, of this situation they had found themselves in. There was no time to dwell on it, though, because another contraction was building and she had to focus all her attention on breathing through it. Dawn was breaking when the baby finally came. emerging into the world with a lusty cry that was the most beautiful sound Sarah had ever heard. Mabel cleaned the infant, wrapped it in a blanket, and placed it in Sarah's arms. "You have a son," she said, smiling. "A big, healthy boy." Sarah looked down at her child, this tiny person with a red, squalling face and impossibly small fingers, and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. He was perfect. Absolutely perfect. All the fear and pain of the past hours evaporated, replaced by fierce, overwhelming love. "Hello," she whispered to him. "I am your mother. We are going to be all right, you and I." The baby quieted at her voice, his eyes opening briefly, unfocused but searching. Sarah cradled him close, breathing in his scent, marveling at the weight of him in her arms. She had done it. She had brought a life into the world, and they had both survived. Mabel finished cleaning up, then went to the door and called for Cole. He came in hesitantly, as if unsure whether he should, but Sarah smiled at him. "Come meet him." Cole approached slowly, his eyes wide as he looked at the baby. "He is so small. He is nearly 9 pounds, according to Mabel. That is not small for a baby." Sarah adjusted the blanket so Cole could see the baby's face. "What do you think?" "I think he is lucky to have you for a mother." Cole's voice was soft, almost reverent, and when he looked up at Sarah, there was something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Tenderness, yes, but also something deeper. Something that scared and thrilled her in equal measure. Mabel stayed for a few hours to make sure Sarah and the baby were stable, then she packed up her bag and prepared to leave. "You did well, dear. Get as much rest as you can and send for me if you have any concerns. Mr. Matheson, I trust you can handle things here." "Yes, ma'am." "I will take good care of them." "I am sure you will." Mabel gave him a knowing look that suggested she had drawn her own conclusions about the nature of his presence, but she did not say anything more. Cole paid her from his own pocket, money Sarah had not known he possessed, and saw her off. When he came back inside, Sarah was nursing the baby, marveling at how instinctively he had latched on, how natural it felt despite being entirely new. Cole busied himself making coffee and breakfast, giving her privacy, and Sarah felt a surge of gratitude for his thoughtfulness. "Have you decided on a name?" he asked later, setting a plate of eggs and toast beside her. Sarah had thought about names throughout her pregnancy, but she had been superstitious about choosing one before the baby arrived safely. Now, looking at her son, she knew exactly what to call him. "Samuel James Campbell. Samuel for my grandfather, who was the only person in my family who was kind to me. James for his father, who deserved to meet him. Samuel James. That is a good, strong name." Cole looked at the baby, and Sarah saw emotion flicker across his face. "He would have been proud, I think. Your husband?" "Yes, he would have." Sarah felt the grief rise up again, the sadness that James would never know his son, would never teach him to ride or work cattle or any of the things fathers did. But the grief was softer now, tempered by the joy of Samuel's arrival. Life moved forward, carrying sorrow and happiness in equal measure. The next few weeks blurred together in a haze of sleepless nights and endless feedings. Samuel was a good baby as babies went, but he still needed constant attention, and Sarah was exhausted in ways she had never imagined possible. Cole took over all the outdoor work and most of the indoor work too, cooking meals, cleaning, doing laundry, giving Sarah time to rest between feedings. He was better with domestic tasks than she would have expected, and when she commented on it, he shrugged. "I lived alone for 2 years. I learned to cook or starve. You are good at it, better than many women I know." I will take that as a compliment, though I am not sure it was meant as one. She had meant it as a compliment, actually, but she was too tired to explain. Instead, she just smiled and went back to nursing Samuel, who was eating like he was trying to grow a foot in a week. As October turned to November, winter arrived in earnest. Snow fell, first in light dustings and then in heavy storms that blanketed the valley in white. The temperature plummeted, and Sarah was grateful every day for the enormous woodpile Cole had split. The cabin stayed warm, the fire always burning, and she and Samuel were safe and comfortable even as the world outside turned hostile. Cole continued sleeping in the barn, though Sarah worried about him in the cold. She had given him every spare blanket she owned, and he insisted he was fine, that he had weathered worse. Still, on the worst nights, when the wind howled and the snow fell sideways, she found herself lying awake worrying about him freezing to death out there. One morning in late November, she woke to find the cabin unusually cold. The fire had gone out during the night, which never happened because Cole always banked it carefully before bed. She bundled Samuel in blankets and went to restart it, and as she worked, she realized that Cole had not come in for breakfast. That was odd. He was usually up at dawn. Worried, she wrapped herself in her warmest coat and went out to the barn. The world was blindingly white, fresh snow covering everything, and the cold hit her like a physical blow. She pushed open the barn door and found Cole huddled on the cot, shivering violently, his face flushed with fever. "Cole," she rushed to his side, pressing her hand to his forehead. He was burning up. "Why did you not come get me?" "Did not want to bother you." His voice was hoarse, his breathing labored. "Just a cold, I will be fine." "You are not fine, you are sick." Sarah made a decision quickly. "Come on, you are coming inside where it is warm." "Sarah, no. It is not proper." "I do not care about proper. You will die out here." She pulled him to his feet, supporting his weight as best she could. He was heavy and weak, stumbling as they made their way across the yard to the cabin. She got him inside and settled him on the bed in the main room, the one she and James had shared, because it was closest to the fire. Then she built up the blaze until the room was sweltering and piled every blanket in the house on top of him. Samuel was crying, needing to be fed, and Sarah juggled caring for both of them, nursing the baby while keeping an eye on Cole. His fever was high, and he drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling words she could not quite make out. Pneumonia, probably, or some other lung ailment. Out here, with no doctor for 15 miles and a snowstorm raging outside, it could easily kill him. She could not let that happen. For the next 3 days, Sarah barely slept. She tended to Cole constantly, sponging his face with cool water, coaxing broth into him when he was lucid enough to swallow, keeping the fire going. She nursed Samuel and changed him and rocked him to sleep, all while keeping vigil over the man who had saved her in so many ways. It was exhausting and terrifying, and she prayed more in those 3 days than she had in years. On the 4th morning, the fever broke. Cole woke up weak and disoriented but lucid, his eyes clear for the first time since he had fallen ill. Sarah was dozing in the chair beside the bed, Samuel asleep in her arms, and she woke when Cole spoke her name. "Sarah." She sat up quickly, hope and relief flooding through her. "You are awake, thank God. What happened? Why am I in your bed? You have been sick, very sick. I brought you inside because you were freezing to death in that barn." She set Samuel in his cradle and poured Cole a cup of water, helping him sit up enough to drink. "You have been unconscious for 3 days. 3 days." He looked shocked. "Sarah, you should not have done that." "Your reputation." "My reputation is not worth your life." She took the cup back, setting it aside. "Besides, anyone who wants to judge me can come out here and manage alone with a newborn baby and see how they do. I am past caring what people think." Cole lay back against the pillows, exhausted from even that small effort. "Thank you for taking care of me." "You have been taking care of me since September. It is the least I could do." Over the next week, Cole recovered slowly, regaining his strength bit by bit. Sarah continued caring for him, and somewhere in the midst of the nursing and the worry and the quiet hours sitting together, something shifted between them. It was subtle, a deepening of the bond that had been forming since he first arrived, but it was undeniable. She found herself watching him when he slept, noticing the way his dark hair fell across his forehead, the shape of his hands resting on the blankets. She found herself thinking about him constantly, worrying when he coughed, relieved when he managed to eat a full meal. And she realized with a start that left her breathless that she was falling in love with him. It was not the same as what she had felt for James. That had been comfortable, companionable, based on mutual respect and practical partnership. This was different. This was the feeling she had read about in books but never experienced, the kind of love that made your heart race and your palms sweat and your whole world narrow down to one person. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure, and she had no idea what to do about it. Cole was only staying through winter. Come spring, he would leave for Crow's Nest or wherever else the wind took him. He was a drifter, and she was a widow with a baby and a homestead to manage. There was no future for them, no matter what her foolish heart might want. But knowing that did not make the feelings go away. By early December, Cole was well enough to move around the cabin, though Sarah insisted he take it easy. He helped with small tasks, amusing Samuel while Sarah cooked, reading aloud to her in the evenings from the few books they had. They fell into an easy domesticity that felt natural, like they had been doing this for years instead of months. And if Sarah sometimes caught Cole looking at her with an expression she could not quite read, she told herself she was imagining it. One evening, with Samuel asleep in his cradle and the fire crackling softly, Cole finally brought up the topic they had both been avoiding. "Sarah, we need to talk about spring." Her heart sank, but she kept her voice steady. "All right. I have been thinking about leaving like we agreed. And the thing is, I do not want to go." He turned to face her, his expression serious. "These past months being here with you, helping with the homestead and taking care of Samuel, it is the most at home I have felt since I left Texas, maybe even before that. And I keep thinking that maybe I do not have to keep drifting, maybe I could stay." Sarah's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Stay? What do you mean?" "I mean permanently. I could work the homestead with you, help you raise Samuel, build a real life here." He paused, seeming to gather his courage. "Sarah, I know this is sudden, and I know I am probably crazy for even suggesting it, but I have come to care for you deeply. And for Samuel, too. You have become my family, and I do not want to leave my family." She stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. "Cole, I do not understand. Are you saying you want to stay as a hired hand?" "No, I am saying I want to stay as your husband, if you will have me." The world seemed to stop. Sarah could not breathe, could not think. He was proposing. Cole Matheson, the drifter who had stopped to help her split wood, was proposing marriage. "I know it is fast," he continued, filling the silence. "I know you just lost James and you probably need more time to grieve, but I have to be honest with you, Sarah. I am in love with you. I think I have been since that first day when you handed me the axe and trusted me enough to let me stay. You are strong and brave and kind, and you have made me want to be a better man. I want to be here for you and Samuel, not just through winter but through everything. I want to build a life with you if you will let me." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. She had not expected this, had not let herself hope for it, and now that it was happening, she did not know how to respond. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately, to grab onto this chance for happiness with both hands, but another part of her hesitated, cautious and afraid. "Cole, I care about you too, more than I probably should." She wiped at her eyes, frustrated by the tears. "But this is not just about us. I have Samuel to think about and this homestead. Marriage is not something to rush into." "I am not rushing. I have had months to think about this." He reached out and took her hand, his grip warm and solid. "I know you need time, and I will give you all the time you need. But I wanted you to know how I feel so you can think about it, so you know you have options beyond managing alone." Sarah looked down at their joined hands, feeling the calluses on his palms, the strength in his fingers. She thought about the past months, about everything he had done for her, about the way he had cared for Samuel like the baby was his own. She thought about the way her heart lifted when she saw him each morning, the way she felt safe and less alone when he was near. And she realized that she did not need more time. She already knew her answer. "Yes," she said softly. "Yes, I will marry you." Cole's face lit up with such pure joy that it took her breath away. "You will, truly, truly. You have already been acting as my husband in every way that matters. We might as well make it official." She smiled through her tears. Besides, I love you too. I think I have for a while now, but I was too scared to admit it." He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and Sarah melted into the embrace. It felt right, being held by him, being loved by him. For the first time since James died, she felt like the future might hold something good. "When?" Cole asked, pulling back to look at her. "When should we get married?" "As soon as we can get to town. I do not want to wait. The snow will melt eventually. And when it does, we will go to Crow's Nest and find a minister and make this legal." She reached up and cupped his face, feeling the rasp of stubble against her palm. "I want you to be Samuel's father in truth, not just in practice, and I want more children with you if God wills it." "I would like that, all of it." Cole kissed her then, soft and sweet, a promise of things to come. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. They were married in late December, during a break in the weather that allowed them to make the trip to Crow's Nest. The minister asked if they were sure, given that Sarah's first husband had only been dead 4 months, but Sarah assured him they were certain. They stood before him with Samuel in Sarah's arms and exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other until death parted them. Cole slid a simple gold band on her finger, one he had bought from the jeweler in town with the last of his savings, and Sarah felt tears of happiness roll down her cheeks. They were family now, truly and officially. Cole Matheson, Sarah Campbell Matheson, and baby Samuel. A ready-made family born from tragedy and loneliness and the simple act of one person helping another. The winter passed in a blur of contentment. Cole was an attentive husband, affectionate and considerate, and Sarah marveled at how different this marriage felt from her first. She had respected James, but she loved Cole, and the difference was profound. They laughed together, talked for hours, made love with a passion that surprised and delighted her. He was wonderful with Samuel, rocking him to sleep, singing silly songs, changing diapers without complaint. Watching him with the baby made Sarah fall even more in love with him, if that was possible. Spring arrived with a riot of wildflowers and the sound of snowmelt rushing down the mountains. Cole worked the homestead with renewed purpose, repairing winter damage, planting crops, tending the cattle. Sarah worked beside him when she could, with Samuel strapped to her back in a carrier Cole had fashioned from canvas and rope. They were building something together, not just a homestead but a life, and it felt good and right and true. In May, Sarah discovered she was pregnant again. The news delighted Cole, who swept her up in a careful hug and danced her around the kitchen. Samuel watched from his blanket on the floor, clapping his hands at his parents' antics. "Another baby," Cole said, wonder in his voice. "I am going to be a father twice over." "You are already Samuel's father in every way that matters." Sarah kissed him, pouring all her love into it. "But yes, another baby, our baby, due in January if my calculations are correct. January, a winter baby." Cole placed his hand over her still flat belly, his expression tender. "We will be ready this time. Plenty of firewood, plenty of supplies, and I will be right here with you." "I know you will. I am not scared this time." And she was not. With Cole beside her, she felt capable of anything. The months passed in happiness and hard work. The crops came in well, the cattle thrived, and Samuel grew from a tiny infant into a robust baby who babbled and crawled and got into everything. Cole proved to be a natural father, patient and playful, and Sarah often found herself just watching the two of them together, her heart full to bursting. As her belly grew with the second pregnancy, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed in just over a year. She had gone from desperate widow struggling alone to happy wife with a loving husband and a growing family. It was more than she had ever hoped for, certainly more than she had thought possible that day when she stood chopping wood, 8 months pregnant and terrified of the future. Their daughter was born on a snowy January night in 1885, arriving with less drama than Samuel had. Mabel Harper attended again, and Cole stayed with Sarah throughout the labor, holding her hand, encouraging her, being the kind of partner she had not known to wish for the first time around. The baby girl was small but healthy, with a shock of dark hair and her father's green eyes. "What should we name her?" Cole asked, cradling his daughter with reverent care. Sarah had thought about this. Grace, for the grace that brought you into my life, Grace Elizabeth Matheson. Elizabeth? Cole looked surprised. After my former fiancé? No. After the woman who was foolish enough to let you go because her loss was my gain. Sarah reached out and touched the baby's tiny hand. Besides, it is just a name. What matters is the person who carries it, and our Grace will make it entirely her own. Cole's eyes were suspiciously bright. Grace Elizabeth, I love it, I love you. I love you too, more than I can say. They raised their children in that homestead, building the ranch into something prosperous through hard work and determination. Samuel grew into a strong, capable boy who idolized his father and learned everything Cole could teach him about horses and cattle and working the land. Grace grew into a spirited, intelligent girl who could outride most boys and had opinions on everything. 2 more children followed, another son they named John and a daughter named Clara, and the cabin they had once shared was eventually replaced by a larger house with room for everyone. Cole never regretted staying. He told Sarah often that the day he stopped to help her split wood was the day his real life began, the day he stopped running from his past and started building his future. Sarah felt the same way. She had thought she was alone, had believed she would have to survive through grit and determination with no help and no hope of anything better. Instead, she had found love in the most unexpected place, with a drifter who turned out to be exactly what she needed. They grew old together on that homestead in Montana Territory, watching their children grow and have children of their own. They faced hard times, drought and harsh winters and the endless challenges of ranch life, but they faced them together. And when people asked how they met, Sarah would smile and tell them about the day she was chopping wood while 8 months pregnant, and a cowboy took the axe and split enough for winter. He saved my life, she would say, and Cole would always correct her. We saved each other. Because that was the truth of it. They had found each other in their darkest moments and built something beautiful from the wreckage of their separate pasts. It was a love story forged in hard work and honesty and mutual respect, in kindness and patience and the simple act of showing up every day. It was not the kind of romance that novels were written about, with grand gestures and dramatic declarations. It was better. It was real. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in 1934, surrounded by children and grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren. Samuel, now a grown man running the ranch with his own sons, gave a toast. To my parents, he said, raising his glass. Who taught me that love is not just a feeling but a choice you make every day? Who showed me that family is built through loyalty and work and showing up even when it is hard? Who gave me and my siblings a home full of laughter and warmth and security? Thank you for everything. Sarah looked at Cole across the table, and he smiled at her, the same smile that had made her heart flutter 50 years ago. His hair was white now, his face lined with wrinkles, but his eyes were still the same green, still filled with love and warmth when he looked at her. Not bad for a drifter and a desperate widow, he said quietly so only she could hear. Not bad at all, she agreed. They had built a life together, against the odds and expectations, and it had been a good life. A happy life. The kind of life worth living, worth fighting for, worth celebrating. And it had all started with a simple act of kindness, a stranger stopping to help a woman in need, and the love that grew from that one decision to stay instead of keep running. Years later, after Cole passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 89, Sarah would sit on the porch of the house they had built together and look out over the ranch that had been their life's work. She would think about that day in September 1883, about how scared and alone she had felt, about how impossible the future had seemed. And she would thank God for sending her Cole Matheson, for giving them 51 years together, for blessing her with a love she had never expected to find. She lived 3 more years after Cole's death, long enough to see Samuel's youngest daughter get married, long enough to hold her first great-great-grandchild. And when she passed away quietly one spring morning, surrounded by family, her last thoughts were of Cole and that first winter they had spent falling in love. They buried her next to him on a hill overlooking the ranch, under the Montana sky they had both loved so much. The headstone was simple. Sarah Campbell Matheson, 1863 to 1937, beloved wife and mother. But the legacy they left was anything but simple. It was a family, generations of Mathesons who would carry on their values of hard work and kindness and showing up for the people you love. It was a ranch that would thrive for another century, passed down through the family, a testament to what two people could build when they chose love over fear. And it all started with firewood. With a pregnant woman too stubborn to quit and a drifter looking for a reason to stop running. With an axe and a woodpile and the first tentative seeds of trust that grew into something far more beautiful than either of them could have imagined. In the small cemetery on the hill, the wind whispers through the grass, carrying stories of the past into the future. And if you listen carefully, you can almost hear the sound of an axe splitting wood, the sound that changed two lives forever. The sound that echoed through generations and became a love story worth telling and retelling until the mountains themselves wear away to dust. The end came peacefully for both of them, as it should for people who lived fully and loved deeply. Their great-grandchildren would tell their children about the couple who built the ranch, about how they met in the hardest of circumstances and created something lasting and good. The story became family legend, embellished and simplified over the years, but never losing its essential truth. That love can be found in the most unexpected places, that kindness matters, that showing up for someone in their darkest hour can change everything. The ranch still stands today, though it is run by great-great-grandchildren who never knew Sarah and Cole personally. But they know the stories, and they know the values their ancestors lived by. Every winter, when it comes time to split wood for the season, someone always tells the story about how it all began. About the pregnant widow and the drifter cowboy, about the axe and the woodpile, about the love that grew from one simple act of helping. And every time the story is told, it reminds them that the best things in life often come from the smallest moments of grace, from choosing kindness over convenience, from staying when it would be easier to leave. Sarah and Cole's love story was not unique in its elements, but in its execution, in the way they honored their commitment to each other every single day for more than 50 years. That was the real miracle, not the romance of their meeting but the sustained devotion of their life together. The valley where they built their life remains beautiful, the mountains still standing guard over the homestead that became a ranch that became a legacy. And somewhere in the rhythm of the seasons, in the sound of cattle lowing and children laughing and axes splitting wood for winter, Sarah and Cole's love story continues, timeless and true, a reminder that the best love stories are the ones we build ourselves through patience and work, and the simple, profound choice to stay.